post here in Saint Augustine. I started laughing at them. They say, man, why are you laughing at us? I said, man, I don't believe that goes nonsense. I never had an experience. And they said, okay, big man, we challenge you. You spend the night in that old jail. I spend the night in the old jail. That's a breeze. Hey, folks, I was in Vietnam and I used to be a cop in Fort Lauderdale, okay? I'm not afraid of anything. I said, sure, I'll spend the night in that old jail. Well, I knew the owner of the trolley, so when you spend the night there was no big deal. Now, before I go any farther here, how many of you have been through the old jail in St. Augustine? Yeah, folks, if you haven't been through there, go through there as soon as you can after you hear this story, okay? But before I go any farther here, let me give you a little brief history of the old jail. That old jail was built here in St. Augustine, 1891. It was built here by the Pauley Jail Company out of St. Louis, Missouri. Yes, folks, that's the same company later going to build another jail that they will call Alcatraz.
Oh boy.
So when you take that tour through that jail, you walk up those stairs to the second floor and you walk down that main cell block, believe me, sir, you are an Alcatraz. Now when that jail was built here in 1891, it was only built here with 72 inmates. Not very comfortably. Take the tour through there. Look at the size of that jail cell. It was only built to hold 4 men. But folks, you walk in that jail cell, there's 2 steel bunks on the left, 2 steel bunks on the right, and only that much space between the bunks. Not much room at all. And you only got 1 bath a month. And that bath consisted of 1 barrel of water. First man, he jumped in there, he got a little but a good bath. How'd you like to be in that 72nd man? To get that same bath water. And remember when that jail was built, there was no electricity, no running water, no medical assistance, no restroom facilities. All you had in your jail cell was a bucket to urinate or defecate in. But folks, what started happening here was when Henry Flagler built his 2 beautiful hotels here in St. Augustine, and all of his rich and wealthy friends were coming down from the north to stay in his hotels. Guess who followed all these rich and wealthy people down here from the north?
Criminals.
Criminals, con artists, ladies of the evening. So now in the late 1890s, during the turn of the century, that jail built hold 72 inmates would now have 100 to 140 inmates. Instead of 4 men in those crowded cells, you have 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 8 men in a cell. Remember, no electricity, no running water, no medical assistance, no restroom facilities. All you have is a bucket to urinate or defecate in. Hey, folks, a lot of guys didn't use the bucket. Did it on the floor. Lived in it. So a lot of guys in that jail back then died from diseases. A lot of guys in there murdered their own cellmates out of sheer frustration. And folks, that's not counting the 10 to 12 hangings they had right out back on the gallows. They had a double hanging here one day, 2 men at the same time. So you think maybe that jail might be a little haunted? Listen to this. 2 nights later, after they challenged spending the night here, I got off work that day. I called my wife up on the phone. I says, honey, bring me down a pillow, a blanket, a book, a flashlight. Run down there to McDonald's. Give me a bag of hamburgers, some French fries, and a Diet Coke. She said, why? I said, I was spending the night in the old jail. She said, you're totally nuts. I said, well, I know that. These guys here can do it. Do it. So anyway, 7:30 that night, she showed up everything I wanted. Now, if you've been through the jail, or you're going to go through the jail, I'm going to tell you what cell they locked me in, okay? If you take the tour of the jail and you walk up those stairs to the second floor and you walk down the main cell block, I was in the first cell on the right. They put me in that cell that night. They slammed the big steel door shut. They put a big padlock on the door, walked out the back door, locked that door also. No lights on there. The only light that shined in there was a light that was out in the parking lot that shined through one of the rooms with the bars on it that cast a shadow on the wall right behind me. Well, there I sit. I said, wow, this is pretty cool. Love the pillow, straighten out the blanket, fired a flashlight, found a good chap in the book, reached in the bag, pulled me out of McDonald's hamburger, threw the pickles off that thing. Hate the McDonald's pickles. And I started getting all comfy and everything in there. And then things started happening in that old jail. If you take the tour of the jail and you walk up those stairs to the second floor and you walk down that main cell block, walk all the way to the end, the last cell on the left side still has the big heavy steel padlock on it. But folks, for some reason, that big heavy steel padlock started banging against the bars. Bam, bam. That went on all night long. Every once in a while, the corner of my eye, I catch a shadow going by, and the shadow's on the wall right behind me. I feel the cap on my shoulder. I turn around. No one there. Then the temperature around me would drop and get cooler than it is, and then slowly come back up to the normal temperature. And then I started smelling defecation. That means poo-poo. That went on there all night long. You think I got to sleep in that old jail that night? No way. When they came in here at 7:30 in the morning, they unlocked that jail cell, folks. They had been staying out of my way because I was coming out of there. I was going to drive a trolley that day, and I say, hey, man, I ain't driving no trolley. I'm going home taking 2 Tylenol pills going to bed. I'm out of here. Folks, that was my first ghostly experience here in St. Augustine. It was not to be my last, as you're going to hear as we go through the tour. Now, folks, I'm quoted in several of the ghost story books about St. Augustine for this one statement, that your mind is like a book. Once it's opened, it can never be closed. What I mean by that is when you have your first ghostly experience, your mind will become open and you will become susceptible to having another ghostly experiences a lot easier than a person that's a non-believer will. Because yes, folks, believe me, since that night in that jail, I've had several experiences here in St. Augustine. And folks, by the way, that old jail was still in use right here in St. Augustine until 1953. Folks, believe it or not, I've had people on this tour that have stayed in that jail for real. I had an older man on the tour one night, got caught here for vagrancy when he was a young man. Had to spend 4 nights in that jail, said the worst 4 nights of his entire life. Right. If you ever go into this house, don't you ever mention I told you the story. Okay? Okay? Because people own the house right that bond about the story being told. But it's a true factual story, and I want to tell you anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, notice this house directly behind me. Notice the tall chimney on the side of the house. Notice the tall window up on the 2nd floor. Folks, in 1957, there was a lady who lived in this house back then by the name of Miss Faye. Miss Faye was not a nice lady. She did not like people. She did not like making friends with people. She was a recluse. She lived in the house by herself, not a good housekeeper, and she was also a chain smoker. And you know what? Do you know what? Miss Faye actually worked right here on St. George Street, part-time, in a restaurant as a waitress of all things. So you can imagine she made very good tips, I'll tell you that right. But there's one night in 1957, Miss Faye got off from work. She came walking home alone, right down the street, cut right across this parking lot, went in the back door of this house, and she was walking up the very narrow staircase inside, going up to her bedroom up on the 2nd floor. When she notices, oh my goodness gracious, this staircase is getting rickety. It's starting to fall apart. So the next day on her way to work, she met this young man. That said, he was a carpenter. She hires him to go in there and rebuild that staircase. Every day, this young man's over here working away on that staircase. But every day, when Miss Faye would come up and work, she would light in on him. Got the case done yet? I thought you said you were a good carpenter, the station's done by now. He looks at her and goes, look, lady, I'm doing the best I can. Kept working on that staircase. Almost done with the staircase. Getting ready to finish the top 3 steps. When she came home and worked again, started in on again. You still haven't got this staircase done. This time he looked at her right in the eye and he said, look, lady, I can't take you anymore. I'm done. I quit. I'm out of here. See ya. Packed up all the tools and leaves. She was great. He quit. Now I don't have to pay him. Later that night, Miss Faye was up in her bedroom when apparently for some reason she had to go downstairs. Nobody knows why. Maybe to get another secret. Maybe use the ladies' room. Nobody knows. Because folks, when she stepped on the top step of the staircase, guess what happens? Flipped out from under her. She tumbled headfirst all the way down the narrow staircase. When she got to the bottom of the staircase, Miss Faye had a broken neck. Miss Faye was dead. Now she didn't show up for work the next day, which was totally awesome with everybody working with her.
Right.
It's going to be a good day. But folks, she didn't show up for work for 5 days. No one would come over here and check on her.
I'll go figure,
The only way they found Miss Faye was the mailman. Came up to the front door to slide the mail through the door slot. When he lifted up the little flap to slide in the mail, oh God, He got a whiff of this foul odor. Called the police. The police came out. They found the decomposing body of Miss Faye at the bottom of the staircase. Now, folks, this house stood vacant for years and years and years. And you know what? I actually know a lady right here in Saint Augustine today, folks, that actually knew Miss Faye in 1957. Yeah, she was a young lady. Is that right? She was a young lady back then. Now I lost my train of thought. What? Yeah, she actually knew me. But she said this one night in 1988, she was out taking an evening walk, coming right down the street right here. She says around 6:30, around sundown. Hey folks, remember, this house was vacant. There were no curtains up in that window on the second floor. But she said that night as she was walking down the street, she looked up in that window, and lo and behold, there was Miss Faye standing there looking out the window. She remembered what Miss Faye looked like. So the next day when she went to work on St. George Street, she was so excited, she started telling all of her friends, I saw her last night! Oh. I saw her! I did! She was looking at me out the bedroom window, she was.
There she is now!
Everyone started laughing at her. Everyone called her a liar. Then she said she went out and bought herself a 35mm camera, carried that camera with her all the time. Sure enough, 3 months later, folks, again walking down the street again, same time at 6:30 sundown. Looked up in that window again, and lo and behold, there was Miss Faye again, just standing there looking out the window. This time she whipped up the camera, took a picture, had that picture developed, had 10 copies blown up tape by 10s. Then she went back on St. George Street, and every one of those people that laughed at her, called her a liar, gave them one of the pictures. So yes, folks, do not be surprised if you're shopping on St. George Street and you walk into one of these stores and shops, in there look around all the cool stuff they got in there. Hey, don't be surprised, look up on the wall, folks, and see an 8x10 picture of this house with a lady looking out that window. That will be Miss Faye. And yes, folks, I've seen those pictures. Now, like I said, that house stood vacant for years and years and years. But folks, 10 years ago, there was an English couple that came up from England, bought this house, opened up a restaurant here called the Prince of Wales Restaurant Pub, an English food restaurant, and yes, they were the people that did not like this story being told. Man, I don't know why, being from England, no. On the country in the world, right? But they didn't like that story being told. But folks, they sold this building 2 years ago now, moved back to England. The new people have taken it over. Oh yeah, they're open about the story about Miss Faye. And folks, I got to be really good friends with the new owners here. And they said, oh, yeah, hey, Sheriff, man, weird things happen in this house. They said when we shut the restaurant down at nighttime, it's already open first thing in the morning. What he means by that, the salt shakes are refilled, the pepper shakes are refilled, the napkins are refilled, the rest of the clean, beers and the rest of the clean. They says every morning when he locks the front door and walks in, the first thing he always notices, every salt shaker and every table is laid on the side. He came in one morning while the salt shaker's on the bar, actually had the top removed, salt poured on top of the bar. Went in the ladies' restroom, and there were little tiny handprints all over the mirror in the ladies' restroom. Told his employees about it. They laughed at him. Made them all get up early in the morning. Meet him on that front porch and see this for themselves. And folks, I guarantee you, if you ever go in there when they're open, talk to the owner. He's usually there all the time. He's got long black hair. Or talk to the pretty blonde waitress named Trish. Because folks, they're going to tell you the same thing I just told you a few minutes ago. That house was built in 1865. Now, can anyone standing here tell me what the most famous haunted house is in the United States? The key word here, famous. Anybody know?
White House.
Any other guesses? Winchester's number 5.
Stanley Hotel.
Pardon?
Stanley Hotel.
Nope. Say it again, sir.
White House.
The White House, exactly right. Because, folks, they say the ghost of Abraham Lincoln is still seen today walking down the halls and corridors of the White House, especially on the Oval Office Lincoln bedroom. Hey, folks, he's been seen by over 6 different United States presidents. How many other presidents have seen him? So we'll say anything. And one president you see Lincoln all the time, talk to Lincoln, ask for his advice on world problems, John F. Kennedy. And when he was assassinated, Lyndon Baines Johnson continued on with that same tradition, which I find very ironic, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Here you got 2 Democrat presidents asking a Republican president for advice, right? And another president, you see Lincoln and his wife very animate about talking to Lincoln on the Ouija board. Come on, folks, you ought to get this one. Any guesses? Which one? Nancy Reagan. Folks, Nancy Reagan was a real nut on the Ouija board. Totally convinced she could talk to the dead. Probably doing it right now. Okay.
All right, and we continue.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to please beware. You just beware of this here sign. That's right, the sign. Because if you will notice, it's kind of mounted right here in the middle of the sidewalk, right? You beware of the sign. Folks, I was doing this tour about 3 weeks ago, a very large group that night, but in the group that night I had a young blonde teenage girl.
Of course.
Walking with her mother behind me. When the last thing I heard that girl say to her mother was, "Mom, do you really think there's ghosts in this?" But she walked smack dab into this here sign. That's why it's loose like this. But luckily she didn't get hurt. She's more embarrassed than anything else. But please beware of the sign and beware of the fire hydrant and the water meter coming up here. Okay? Right this way. What?
Chrysia.
Whatever. What's your name?
Jessica.
Jessica. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, look to your left. Another one of the 27 bed and breakfasts we have here in Saint Augustine. This is called the Southern Goin. Now, folks, back in the early 1920s, there was a family that lived in this house back then that had these 2 beautiful young daughters. One daughter got married when she was 18 years old.
Yeah,
So the other
I know what you
daughter,
mean.
poor little Jessica, she didn't get married until she was 36 years old. And she, I'm sorry, Jessica. And she was married in a beautiful white wedding dress, but she was only married here for a year when she died.
I'm not married, so.
Oh, goodness.
Oh,
And she was married
yeah.
right here. And folks, some people have said they have seen the lady in the white wedding dress walking back and forth on the porch up on the 2nd floor or standing in one of these bottom 2 windows. Now, folks, are you familiar with TripAdvisor?
Yeah.
Familiar with TripAdvisor? Okay, if you go on TripAdvisor and put in Sherrif's Ghost Store, St. Augustine, Florida, you'll see my site pop up on there. Folks, there's over 170 photos on there that people have taken during these tours. Now, folks, here 2 years ago, I do not know what was going on here in St. Augustine that night, but I had a lady on this tour. Every place we were stopping, I was telling the story, she's taking pictures and catching something every single time. Folks, she caught Miss Faye in that window of that house. You go on there, you scan through the picture, be the first one that'll pop up on there when you start scanning through, and yes, you'll see Miss Faye up in the window on the right side. She took 5 pictures standing here, caught the lady in a white wedding dress all 5 times in that window right there. I taught the lady with a white dress, wearing a white wedding dress with a black collar. And folks, on this tour a couple of weeks ago, another lady took a picture here. Not only did she catch the lady in a white wedding dress in the window, but standing behind the lady was a man with a beard. My gosh, folks, that's the first time ever I've ever heard or seen anything about a man with a beard in here. Who I think maybe the man with a beard just might be is her new husband. Because, folks, that lady was dying from tuberculosis, or commonly known today as tuberculosis. I meant to say consumption, commonly known today as tuberculosis. She didn't have that much longer to live. And they were trying to get her back to New York to be buried in a family plot. Didn't make it, died here and was buried in the cemetery here. So we think maybe the man with the beard just might be her new husband. Right. Keep on moseying up here if you can. Now, folks, other than those 2 little girls there, we're mostly all adults here tonight, right?
Yeah.
You want to hear an extra story, folks?
Yes.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Now, folks, like I said, we're mostly all adults here tonight, right? Now, folks, sometimes when I'm doing these tours, sometimes unexpected things happen on the tour that's totally beyond my control, right?
Yes.
Hey, case point. I was doing this tour probably about 2 years ago. Very large group that night, about 30 people like we are tonight. I just finished telling the lady about the lady in a white wedding dress walking back and forth on the porch. Folks, I'm walking backwards, pointing up to the porch like this here. I get to this point here, You see that corner room up on the second floor? Well, sometimes, you know, they like to use that room up there for what they call the Honeymoon Suite. Here I come. 30 people walking backwards, pointing up there. Well, apparently the new bride forgot to pull down the middle shade.
Oh, no.
Standing with her back to the window, butt naked. I get to this point here, and I'm looking at moons over Saint Augustine at night.
Oh, yeah.
And pretty nice moons, I might add.
Oh.
And I was dumbfounded. I'm like, oh, wow, moons! Then something said, hey, Sheriff, man, you got 30 people standing in front of you. Oh, man, now I'm feeling like the biggest pervert in St. Augustine. I turned around and looked at my group. I about died. Because, folks, every boy and man that tour had a camera, a cell phone in his hand, were taking pictures of the moons.
Yeah.
Well, it looked like a Vietnam firefight going off here that night with all the flash and all. Caught her attention. What do you think she did?
Yeah.
Turned around, bent down, started waving at everybody.
No.
Folks, let me tell you, man, I'd made so much money in gratuities off one tour. I'll tell you that right now. Wish that happened every time.
No.
Don Pedro Menendez Diablo landed here, started calling the St. Augustine. But folks, when he landed here on that day, he actually met the native Indians that were right here at that time. They were called the Talamato Indians. The Talamato Indians had a big village right over here. But folks, what you see in front of you right now, or behind you, was the Talamato Indian burial grounds. Pedro Menendez wanted this property of St. Augustine. He made the Indians move farther north, and then he opened up the Catholic cemetery, folks, right over the top of the Talamato Indian burial grounds. So legend says, if you have any Indian blood in you, no matter what it is, Apache, Sioux, Arapaho, Seminole, Cherokee, you stand here long enough staring in these cemeteries, you start seeing shadows moving among those headstones.
Yeah, right.
No extra charge for that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to notice. This little headstone right here in front of us. Does everyone see that little headstone? I said, does everyone see that little headstone?
Yes.
That is the headstone of James P. Morgan. 5 years old. Died November 28, 1877. On that day, November 28, 1877, little James P. Morgan was down here at the cemetery visiting his grandmother's grave with his parents. But apparently no one was paying attention to James P. Morgan. He climbs up in this big oak tree, climbed out on a limb, fell off that limb, hit the ground right there. Died with a broken neck. His mother had him buried right where he died, and then she bought the property all around the headstone so no one else could be buried next to him. Folks, remember that story. Now, folks, we got Dion in front of us now, and we got to go to the entryway of the cemetery before I can start telling you some stories, so I'm going to throw in some extra cool stuff, okay?
Sweet.
Both the cemeteries you're seeing here tonight, the Talamato, the Old Catholic, and the next cemetery going to the Huguenot, the two older cemeteries in St. Augustine. Folks, both these cemeteries were both closed on the same day at the same hour in 1884. Why were they both closed on the same day at the same hour? Folks, St. Augustine is only 4 feet above sea level, right?
Right.
A lot of bodies buried in these two cemeteries back then. Some were buried 6 feet deep. Others, only 3 feet deep. A lot of bodies that were buried here, folks, were not embalmed. And they were buried in wooden coffins, wicker coffins, or just wrapped in a sheet. Whenever the high tide would come in, especially on a full moon, and we had 2, 3, 4 days of saturating rain here, those bodies, especially the ones buried 3 feet deep, would rise to the surface. And folks, that smell from that decomposing, waterlogged body was so potent, it got people sick that lived around the cemeteries. So for sanitary reasons, both these cemeteries closed, same day, same hour, 1884. And folks, why were people buried 3 feet deep? Someone else was already buried 6 feet deep. You're going to hear more about that in a little bit. Now, folks, when you walk around in the daytime, you look in these two cemeteries, you'll see all the above ground crypts out there. Well, folks, in these two cemeteries, all those crypts you see are called false crypts. Why are they called false crypts? There's no bodies in these crypts, folks. The body was either buried 3 or 6 feet deep. The crypt was built over that grave to use it for a marker. Because folks, here in Saint Augustine back then, we had no natural resources here to build a nice headstone. We didn't have granite, we didn't have slate, we didn't have marble. Hey man, you want a nice headstone like that, you had to order that out of Carolinas, have it shipped here. Very expensive. A lot of people couldn't afford that. So they'd be buried 3-6 feet deep, have a crypt built over the grave, and use the crypt for the marker. Folks, in the daytime, look how some of these crypts are made. Some are made out of bricks, concrete block, concrete. Some are even made out of coquina stone. But folks, sometimes a coquina stone crypt don't last. I'm going to show you one here in just a few minutes. Pretty cool?
Yeah.
Remember the tree you saw across the street, 2 trees in one?
Yeah.
Hey, how about 3 trees in one? You got an oak tree, a palm tree coming on the bottom of the oak tree on this side, you got another palm tree coming right through the oak tree on the other side. 3 trees in one, folks, are commonly known right here in Saint Augustine as a threesome. Okay? And you died. And you were not Spanish Catholic. You could not be buried inside that wall, right?
Right.
In the Talamano Cemetery place out 1821, they had a mass yellow fever outbreak here in St. Augustine. Over 300 plus people died from the yellow fever. But folks, over 200 of those people were not Catholics. They were some other religion. They could not be buried inside the wall. So they had to find a place to bury these 200 non-Catholics and start burying them quickly outside the wall. Acquired this land, they opened up the Huguenot Cemetery, the public burial grounds. Folks, if you count the headstones and the crypts in the cemetery today, you will only count 74. But folks, there's well over documented, well over 400 plus people buried here. Some are buried in mass graves, some are buried in trenches, some are buried on marked graves, and yes, folks, you are standing on someone right now. Because, folks, this cemetery actually extended out to the middle of that street and continued on all the way over to the fort grounds. Now, folks, I'm going to ask you some questions here. These are questions you should know the answers to, but you don't. Can anyone tell me what's the difference between a coffin and a casket? What's the difference between a coffin and a casket?
Casket's hinged.
What?
Casket's hinged.
Exactly. A coffin is made out of wood. A coffin has 6 sides, built to conform with the human body. Widen the shoulders, narrow at the feet. Coffins, as a rule, have no lining inside. The lid always nails shut. You want to see a coffin, watch a Dracula movie. Okay? Now, coffins were still in use here in the United States of the 1930s. But in the 1870s is when they came out with caskets that we use today. A casket is made out of metal, rectangular design, full lining inside, rails on the side for easy carrying. Now, can anyone tell me the difference between a cemetery and a graveyard? What's the difference between a cemetery and a graveyard?
A church.
A what?
Church being involved.
This is a cemetery. A cemetery is owned by the city, the county, or church. But folks, a graveyard is owned by the church. But all graves and crypts are on that church's property, usually surrounding that church. Hey, you want to see graveyards? You go to Charleston, South Carolina, or even Savannah.
Oh yeah.
You see the big, beautiful churches, headstones, and crypts all around. That's called a graveyard. Now the big question. Folks, I've been asking this question for 6 months. I've only gotten 10 correct answers, which kind of disturbs me a little bit, because I knew the answer to this question when I was 10 years old. Folks, if you will notice, as a rule, but not in all cases, but as a rule, that in all cemeteries and graveyards, you'll always notice that all the headstones and all the crypts will always face to the east. Why?
Jesus was the east and the sun.
What?
Because Jesus is the sun, sunrise in the east, and Jesus is the east and the sun. That's why churches stay left. Because Jesus is the east and the sun, and the sun rises on the east.
Jesus is coming back.
Not the sunrise. Why do headstones and crypts in the cemetery face east? We almost had it. Because, folks, it says in the Bible, especially in Matthew and Revelations, that on Christ's second coming, he will come from the east. All graves and crypts will break open, the dead shall rise to face him. That will happen in the twinkling of an eye. And if you don't believe me, folks, you can just wait. Or simply Google it. By the way, when I was doing the research on it, I came across something that totally floored me. It says some military headstones will face west. Why would a military headstone face west? Well, I delved into it and came to the correct answer. Because usually today, folks, headstones aren't normally like headstones like these. they're flat stones in the ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
The military headstones are flat stoned in the ground facing west. But folks, when the body is buried, it's in the ground facing east. That is so. You can walk up to the headstone, look down, say a prayer over that person without standing on the body.
So smart.
Didn't know that, did you?
No.
Now, can anyone tell me what that little marker is right over there on the ground? There's a name for it. What's it called? Anybody know? What's that little marker called? A what? Any other guesses? Come on, guys. Didn't you ever go out in cemeteries and graveyards and make out with your girlfriends? Wow, where do you think I learned all this stuff at? Yes, that is called a footstone. You got the headstone, you got the footstone. The footstone actually represents where a man's feet or a lady's feet are on the coffin and casket when the Lord on the ground. Also used as a deterrent to keep you from walking back and forth across the grave. Now, folks, why is it said you have to be buried 6 feet deep? Where did they ever come up with that number at? 6 feet deep. Folks, that actually dates back to the 1300s. Over in Europe, Germany, France, and England, back then, over there, they had a disease called the bubonic plague.
Mm-hmm.
That was caused by fleas on rats. Thousands of people were dying from the bubonic plague. And finally, the mayor of London, England, came up with an idea. You bury those people 6 feet deep. That way, animals cannot dig them up and the bacteria can't get out of the ground. Now, folks, why can't you be buried horizontally, or excuse me, why can't you be buried vertically instead of horizontally? Why can't you be buried standing up instead of lying down? Think of all the spaces that are saved in these cemeteries and graveyards, huh? Because, folks, if you're buried in your coffin or casket in a stand-up position like this, even though you're embalmed, what's going to happen over a period of time? Your body's going to deteriorate, and you're going to start slowly sinking down to the bottom of that coffin or casket. And, folks, could you imagine while your loved ones going through the afterlife all scrunched up in the bottom of their coffin or casket? Wow, that wouldn't even be a pleasant thought, would it?
No.
Now, folks, I'm going to tell you something real quick here. That if this does not scare you, nothing will. Folks, I heard on the news about 3 months ago that right now in Los Angeles, California, they're having a very serious problem there with the migrants and the homeless. Defecating, urinating in the streets. Needles, trash, garbage in the streets. Rats in the streets. Folks, they already had 5 confirmed cases of bubonic plague. 2 cases of leprosy. Probably more than that now. Folks, if you think this COVID-19 is bad, that is nothing compared to the bubonic plague, folks. And I had a lady on my tour from LA a couple weeks ago, and she said that's not the worst of it. She said the police department in that area is completely overrun with rats. They get rid of them. 2 days later, all the rats are back again. Right over here.
All right.